Captain Elias Reed stood alone inside the command room of the Deep Space Research Station, named Horizon 1. The soft hum of machinery filled the air, broken only by the blinking red light on the terminal. A priority transmission had just come. Not from Earth, not from any known ship, but from something ancient and forgotten, floating near a dead star in uncharted space. He pressed the button and the message began to play. What he saw changed everything. It wasn't just a call for help. It was a recording from a dying alien, one of the Council's own. The figure on the screen looked weak, breathing heavy. It whispered in broken galactic standard. I was part of the lie. They fear humans. They fear your anger. Forgive me. Elias's hands clenched, his heart raced. The message continued, revealing how the Galactic Council had manipulated Earth for decades. Earth was never given a fair chance. They were lied to, used for hard labor, sent into deadly missions. While other species sat safe behind glass walls, the Council feared humans not because they were violent, but because they were passionate, because they remembered, because they never gave up. Even when crushed, the screen went dark. Elias stared at his reflection in the black terminal screen. His mind burned with memories, lost crewmates, failed negotiations, broken promises. Now it all made sense. He called for Lieutenant Mira Voss. She entered quickly, noticing the look in his eyes. "What is it, Captain?" she asked. Elias didn't speak. He simply played the message again. Mira stood frozen, her face pale as snow. When it ended, she whispered, "They lied to all of us. They've always lied." Outside the station window, Earth rotated slowly. In the distance, a blue jewel in a dark, cold galaxy. And now, it stood betrayed. Elias opened a secure channel to Earth Command, but before speaking, he paused. If this message got out, everything would change. War, rebellion, revolution, all were possible. But silence meant slavery. Silence meant more human lives lost for the Council's comfort. He pressed send. The message left Horizon 1, riding beams of light toward Earth's military satellites. It would reach world leaders in just 11 minutes. That's all the time Elias had to prepare. He gathered his bridge crew, Mira, Chief Engineer Boone, Communications Officer Sarah, and Security Head Tyrell. None of them smiled. They had all seen too many human ships lost without reason, too many orders that never made sense. Now they knew why. "I'm not asking you to fight," Elias said, standing before them. "I'm asking you to remember who we are." Boone grunted, arms crossed. "I've got a brother who died in the last mission. They said it was an accident." Mira looked away, her voice shaking. "My uncle." "Same thing." Tyrell just nodded. "They've underestimated us for too long." The crew stood united, not with guns, not with rage, but with truth. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were witnesses, and that was more dangerous than any weapon. Across Earth, chaos erupted. Leaders shouted in war rooms. Citizens flooded networks, demanding answers. Protests lit up colony stations. Why did we bleed for them? One sign read, "Who gave them the right to decide our worth?" Another said, but amidst the noise, one voice echoed clearer than all. The voice of Elias Reed. His statement, broadcast across all human networks, was simple. "We gave trust, and were betrayed. We gave effort, and were used. Now we demand truth, and we will not stop. Not until every lie is brought to light." Back on Horizon 1, Mira watched the stars. "Do you think they'll listen?" she asked Elias. He didn't answer right away. He looked at Earth, glowing below, and replied softly, "They don't have a choice anymore." In the distance, unknown ships began to move. Signals scrambled. Council networks lit up in alarm. But the humans, they were no longer silent. And silence had always been the Council's greatest weapon. Now it was broken. The message had shaken Earth, but it had also awakened it, and humanity, once pushed aside, had finally stood up. Not with fury, but with fire in their hearts. And the courage to speak the truth, even if it meant war, even if it meant the stars burned. Because for the first time in history, the galaxy would hear humanity's voice. Unfiltered, unafraid, and unstoppable, Counselor Vale had always known. Something was wrong, even before the message leaked from Horizon 1. He had sat in those grand marble halls of the Galactic Council, listening to lies spoken with polished tongues. The chamber always smelled of wealth, perfumes, rare woods, polished stone, but beneath it, the stench of fear was strong. Not fear of war, not fear of chaos, but fear of one species, humanity. They adapt too quickly, said Counselor Drozen of the Valkyrie. They hold grudges too long, added Cirrus of the Kalmar. They remember pain like it happened yesterday, whispered another. Vale never spoke, but he always listened, and now the proof was out. The message from that dying alien traitor had burned through every human screen, and it couldn't be erased, not even by the Council's best spin teams. Inside the Council chamber, panic had begun. One alien slammed his tentacled arm on the table. Earth must be silenced. Their unity is dangerous. Another shouted, their colonies are rebelling. Even the trade stations are flying human flags. But Counselor Vale stayed silent. He had watched this coming for years. The humans were strong because they were honest, brutally so. They mourned loud, they loved loud, and when they fought, it wasn't clean, but it was real. And real terrified the Council. Years ago, when humanity joined the intergalactic community, they were offered peace, but only in words. What they really received were scraps, low-level science contracts, deep mining assignments, and suicide exploration jobs. Whenever they asked why not more, the Council gave them smiles. You're still too emotional. You haven't earned full trust. You're dangerous when angry. But behind closed doors, secret memos told the truth. Avoid empowering Earth. Limit their technology. Exchange. Never allow them military leadership. And worst of all, human losses are acceptable if it keeps the others safe. Vale had read that one personally. He never forgot it. Back on Earth, Aina Kim, the young human journalist, was decoding another data burst. Someone from within the Council was leaking files. Each file was more horrifying than the last. There were files on Council-ordered sabotage of human cargo ships, evidence of deliberate misinformation to human commanders in battle, even proof that a cure for a human disease had been delayed because the Council wanted to observe human resilience. Aina didn't cry, she screamed, and then she uploaded everything across the stars. Screens lit up with the words, "They didn't fear what we would do. They feared what we could become." The Council tried to respond. They labeled the reports fake. They sent diplomats. They offered new trade deals, but it was too late because truth had a strange effect on humans. It didn't break them. It brought them together. Colonies that hadn't spoken in decades were now coordinating. Soldiers who had left the service returned to duty. Even civilians were volunteering for Starship construction. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about never being silenced. Again, back in the Council chambers, Vale stood at last, his voice calm but heavy. "I warned you," he said. "You created a wall, not a bridge. You made them feel small when they were willing to stand tall beside us." Counselor Drozen sneered. "So what do you suggest? Surrender?" Vale shook his head slowly. "No," he replied. "Apologize before they ask you to kneel." The chamber erupted into shouts, threats, panic. But deep inside, many of them knew the galaxy had changed, and not because of weapons, but because of the truth. Meanwhile, aboard the Avenger, the flagship being built in Earth's orbit, Captain Elias walked through the nearly complete command deck. Engineers moved like clockwork, hands dirty, eyes burning with purpose. Every bolt, every wire was placed by someone who had seen the lies and chosen to act. Mira Voss stood beside him, her arms crossed. "They said we weren't ready," she muttered. Elias smiled faintly. "Now they're not." The ship was almost alive now, pulsing with power, humming with silent fury, a symbol not of conquest, but of awakening. This wasn't about starting a war. This was about ending a long, quiet one. One fought with lies and shadows, back on Earth. As humans gathered in unity, one small child held a sign in a city square. It read, "My dad flew for peace, and they left him to die. Now I want truth, not war." People wept. Not because they wanted blood, but because someone finally said it out loud. And in that moment, the Council's web of deceit began to break. Not with explosions, but with honesty, and with the one thing more dangerous than any weapon, a united human heart. It began with a whisper, not from Earth, not from politicians, but from the miners on Ganymede, from cargo loaders in the asteroid belts, from nurses on Mars Base 12. The message spread without sound, without leaders, but it burned through every human heart. They lied to us, they used us. Now we rise. Mira Voss sat alone in the mess hall of Lunar Base Kilo. Her food sat untouched. Her fingers wrapped around a datapad. She kept watching the same clip over and over. Her brother's final transmission. He had begged for help. His ship was spinning into a black hole after a false mission order. The Council said help was on the way, but no one ever came. Now she knew why. Now all humans knew. The truth had broken like sunlight through dark clouds, and everywhere, rage smoldered just beneath the surface. Quiet, powerful, waiting. At the same time, Earth's moon became a forge, not for weapons, but for something far more dangerous, purpose. They called it Project Prometheus, not a fleet, not an army, but a movement. Built by engineers, backed by volunteers, fueled by pain, and lit by memory. Each room was filled with silent workers. No one complained, no one rested. They all worked with one phrase on their lips. Never again. Mira walked into the command hangar. There stood a vessel like none other, unfinished but glowing with potential. It was huge, smooth, deadly, and unlike anything the Council had seen, not just because it was powerful, but because it was human-made. Without permission, without fear, Captain Elias stood beside the skeleton of the ship, arms crossed. He looked at Mira. "She's not just a ship," he said. "She's our voice." Mira nodded. Her voice was low. "You think they'll let her fly?" Elias didn't blink. "They don't get a choice anymore." In the shadows of Earth's orbit, other ships began to return. Old freighters, retired cruisers, even broken scouts, one by one. They came back home, their human crews silent, but their eyes burning. They weren't soldiers, they were farmers, teachers, cargo runners, but now they were witnesses. And that made them dangerous. On Mars, protests became work camps. People dug out old military yards. Children handed out tools. Elders taught how to repair fusion cores. Even the sick painted slogans on walls. "Truth is fire. Let them feel it." The Council watched in silence. They didn't understand. Why weren't humans panicking? Why weren't they tearing themselves apart? Where was the chaos? Where was the collapse? But the Council had forgotten one thing. Humans didn't break under pressure. They forged in a hidden bunker near Jupiter's rings. A small group of alien rebels met in secret, led by Counselor Vale's aide, a young Zenari named Kelm. He played Aina Kim's report again, showing Council betrayal. The aliens sat in stunned silence. One whispered, "We trusted them too." Kelm looked around. "If we don't speak now, we're next," one voice said. "But humans, they might take revenge." Kelm shook his head. "No," he said. "They'll take justice." Back in Earth orbit, the Prometheus ship was finally sealed. No longer a skeleton, now a beast. They named her Truth Seeker. She carried no formal weapons yet, but every inch of her skin was lined with secret tech. And a message was embedded in her core. A message for the stars. "We saw your lies, we felt your silence. Now we speak." Captain Elias stepped aboard with Mira at his side. No ceremony, no applause, just quiet nods from the builders who had given all they had. One girl, no older than 12, saluted as they passed. "Make them listen," she said. Elias simply nodded. "We will, back on Earth, Aina Kim received one last encrypted file from someone inside the council itself. She opened it and gasped. It wasn't just lies about humans. It was evidence of other species they had betrayed. Other civilizations pushed into ruin to keep the council in control. Her hands trembled as she began to write, not an article, but a manifesto. Not for humans only, but for every voice silenced in the galaxy. As she typed, a single tear rolled down her cheek, not of sadness, but of strength, because fire had started, not from ships, not from missiles, but from hearts, and the galaxy was about to feel its heat. Asterisk inside the heart of the Galactic Council, the air was heavy, not with ceremony, not with pride, but with fear. The chamber was circular wide, with floating seats for each species. It had once been a place of law and leadership. Now it was a stage for blame, panic, and betrayal. Counselor Drozen of the Valkyries slammed his clawed hand on his console. The humans are spreading like a virus. Their truth-seeker vessel just passed Saturn's edge without permission. Counselor Cirrus hissed back. And whose fault is that? You were the one who said they wouldn't fight back. Dozens of voices began to rise in different languages, all angry, all desperate. No one took responsibility, because they all shared the guilt. At the far end of the chamber, restrained in a force field, sat Counselor Vale. His wrists were bound, his head bleeding from the arrest. But his eyes, they were calm. Too calm for the chaos around him. You kept saying they were too emotional, Vale said softly. But look at yourselves now. Counselor Prime Elonora stood and raised her arms. Silence. She roared. The room quieted slightly, but trembled with tension. We must act before the humans turn the entire galaxy against us. Cirrus leaned forward. They already are. There have been over 17 alien species protesting our leadership since the Truth-Seeker launched. Vale smirked. Truth spreads fast when lies rot for too long. Meanwhile on Earth, Aina Kim had published her final manifesto. Not just exposing the Council's crimes against humanity, but revealing decades of manipulation against weaker alien species. Forced migrations, stolen planets, biowarfare experiments, all covered under peacekeeping, her voice echoed across stations and ships alike. We are not the only ones who bled, but we will be the ones to stop the bleeding. Back in the council chamber, Vale's assistant Keln appeared on the main screen. The Zanari looked directly into the faces of his former masters. Your secrets are public now, Keln said. And your words carry no weight, the chamber roared again. Counselors shouted for emergency control, demanded fleet action, begged for silence to be restored. But it was too late. In dozens of systems, alien workers stopped mid-shift. Civilian ships turned off their transponders. Old enemies of the Council began exchanging encrypted messages. The great machine of Council dominance was starting to fall apart. And it all began with a spark. A single truth, spoken too loudly to be ignored. On Luna's hidden base, Project Prometheus received an incoming hail. It was from a rebel group. On the planet Sorex, alien refugees who had once trusted the Council. Now they wanted to join the humans, to build, to fight, to tell their own stories again. Captain Elias Reed looked at the request. He said only one word. Accepted. Fire was spreading, but this wasn't war, not yet. It was revelation. And revelation was dangerous to those who built their thrones on lies. Back in the council chamber, Vale was suddenly released. The security field flickered off. The guards turned away. Some even saluted him in secret. Vale stood slowly, his voice calm. The humans do not want to conquer, he said. They want to be heard, Drozen snarled. And what if they stop listening? Vale turned to him with cold eyes. Then they will roar. Outside the chamber, the people of the capital world had gathered. Thousands of alien citizens holding banners, not in support of Earth, but in rejection of silence. A small child, not human, held a board with words written in human standard. Tell the truth, or leave the stars, inside her starship. Aina Kim watched the footage and smiled sadly. This wasn't victory. This was just the beginning. She sent out one last message. To all who could hear, let your voice be louder than their fear. Let your past be heavier than their lies. Let your future be one we build together. In orbit above the capital world, the truth seeker hovered. Quietly, its lights were soft, its weapons offline, but its signal pulsed like a heartbeat. A reminder that the galaxy had changed, that humans had risen, not for power, but for truth. Inside the bridge, Elias stood with Mira. She looked out the glass and whispered, "They're listening now." Elias nodded. "But will they act?" And in the shadows of every world, from icy moons to city planets, aliens who had been silent for generations began to whisper too, because the sparks in the Senate had become something far greater. A fire without borders, without species, without chains. And the council? They could no longer pretend they didn't see the smoke. The earth was no longer divided. Borders, flags, politics, they still existed. But none of them mattered now, because for the first time in human history, everyone had the same enemy. Not a species, not a nation, but a lie. In New Geneva, leaders from every continent stood in one room. Some had once sworn they'd never share air, but now they stood side by side, silent. On the wall behind them played Aina Kim's final manifesto, each word echoing with the weight of centuries. "We begged for peace," her voice said, "and they used our hands to build their throne." In a quiet vote, one by one, each world power placed its answer. Every screen flashed the same word. Yes, yes to unity, yes to resistance, yes to a future they would shape themselves. On the moon, the Project Prometheus command center buzzed with activity. Ships were being built at record speed. Medical teams trained for alien injuries. Diplomats were being selected not from governments, but from survivors, people who had seen the Council's lies up close. Captain Elias Reed walked through the corridors of the Truth Seeker. The ship no longer felt empty. Its halls carried the weight of a world that had found its voice. Mira joined him, her boots echoing on the polished floor. "They voted," she said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "All of them?" Mira nodded. "Even the ones who hated each other yesterday." He smiled faintly. "That's the power of truth." Back on Earth, workers filled the old launch fields, men and women with dust on their hands and fire in their hearts. Children passed water bottles to engineers. Old veterans taught teenagers how to aim a pulse rifle. The entire planet had become one machine, one voice, one purpose. In orbit, ships began to arrive. Not human ships, alien vessels, small and worn. Their captains tired but hopeful. They came without weapons. Only stories. One alien named Varka, from the enslaved Alari race, stepped off his transport. He bowed low before Elias. "My people thought humans were monsters." He said, "We were wrong. Monsters lie. You told the truth." Elias helped him to his feet. "No more bowing," he said. "Stand beside us." And Varka did. In space, colonies once isolated, now connected like a web. Transmissions flowed freely. Strategies, blueprints, stories of betrayal, all shared with open hands. Because unity didn't come from strength, it came from trust. On Mars, a group of former Council scientists defected. They offered knowledge and proof. Files that confirmed everything Aina had published. Chemical tests on humans, planned famines, genetic limits placed on Earth crops, all to slow them down, to keep them dependent. The Mars governor, an old woman named Dr. Lin, watched the files with tears in her eyes. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "All this time. We weren't broken, we were chained. And now the chains were shattered." Project Prometheus declared its final phase, the formation of a united human-led alliance, not to rule, but to rebuild. Their first charter was simple: no species shall kneel before another. No truth shall be hidden in darkness. No voice shall be silenced for peace. The document was signed not by generals, but by a soldier's widow, a mining child, an alien translator, and Captain Elias Reed, back aboard the Truth Seeker. Mira stared at the stars. "They're watching us," she said. Elias stepped beside her. "Let them," he replied. "We've been silent too long." Down on Earth, a boy sat beside a campfire, listening to his grandmother's stories. "Once, they told us to stay small," she said, "but your parents chose to stand tall." The boy looked up. "Will I fly one day too?" She smiled. "You won't just fly, you'll lead." And far across the stars, in council-controlled space, more voices whispered in secret. "If humans can unite," one said, "so can we." The galaxy had always believed humans were dangerous when divided, but now they were about to learn something far more terrifying. What happens when humanity stands together? The stars were quiet, too quiet. Captain Elias stood on the bridge of the Truth Seeker, his hands behind his back, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Across the screen, a convoy of human transport. Ships moved slowly through neutral space, medical freighters, food carriers, refugee ships, unarmed. Their only crime was carrying the human flag, and the Council attacked, without warning. 3 Council warships decloaked. They didn't ask for ID, didn't hail, didn't threaten. They opened fire. The first freighter was split in half. The second tried to run. It didn't make it. The third sent a distress call, and Truth Seeker answered. Elias's voice cut through the silence. "Engines online, shields up, prepare for jump." Miravas sat at the weapons console, her hands trembling for just a moment. Then they steadied. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. The ship jumped through space. Silent as a ghost, in seconds, it exited FTL directly behind the enemy fleet. The Council ships didn't even know it was there. Not until Truth Seeker opened its eyes. The first pulse was not a weapon. It was a broadcast. "You attacked the unarmed. You fired without cause. This is your answer." Then the ship moved. It didn't scream. It didn't roar. It glided, silent, precise, like a predator in water. Its beams cut the first Council warship clean through. The second turned to flee, but its engines died before it moved an inch. The third begged for mercy, and was spared. Elias ordered it to drift, powerless, so it would serve as a message, back on Earth. The footage played within minutes. The galaxy watched in silence, not at the destruction, but at the discipline. The humans hadn't fired first, but they had finished it. 1,000 alien races watched that feed and whispered the same words. "They're not afraid anymore." Inside the Council chamber, chaos returned. How did they find us so fast? Why didn't their ship match our scans? They have new tech. We don't even understand it. Vale stood again, his chains now gone. He didn't smile. He simply said, "They told you not to push. You didn't listen." Across human colonies, memorials were held for the lost freighters. Children laid flowers beside holostatues. Elders sang old Earth songs mixed with alien harmonies. No cries for war, only promises. We remember, on Mars, the final vote was cast. The human unification fleet was born. Every ship, every engineer, every pilot, united under one command, one message. Never again. The Truth Seeker led the formation. Behind her, hundreds of ships followed. Some military, some civilian, some alien, but all loyal to the truth. They weren't heading for war. They were heading for proof, to the secret station known as Haven Prime, a hidden Council research base. One rumored to hold files about every lie, every sabotage, every erased life. Mira briefed the crew, her voice calm. "This base holds the answers, and they'll do anything to protect it." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make sure the galaxy sees what they're willing to kill to hide." As the fleet approached Haven Prime, the Council scrambled. Ships were deployed, weapons charged, threats broadcast. But the humans didn't stop. They moved like a tide, patient, unstoppable. When the first Council blockade fired, it met more than return fire. It met coordination, precision, rage wrapped in unity. Haven Prime's defenses fell in less than 4 hours. No civilian was harmed, no building was leveled without purpose. The files were extracted, live-streamed across the galaxy. Footage showed the Council creating artificial shortages, directing slave labor from desperate alien colonies, using false peace treaties to destroy rebel species. The galaxy cried out in one voice, "Enough!" Councillor Cirrus fled her seat, Drozen locked himself in a bunker, and Prime Elanaris vanished without a trace. But Vale remained. He stood before the council chamber, now filled with reporters, aliens, humans, civilians, rebels, and he said, "The first strike is over. The lies are broken. Now comes the hard part. Building something better." Back aboard the Truth Seeker, Elias looked at the stars. Mira beside him, "Quiet," he said. "They made the first move." She nodded. "And we made the last." In the darkness between stars, a new future was forming, one not ruled by fear, but born from fire. The first strike wasn't the start of war, it was the end of silence. The Council homeworld had never seen this much silence. Its towers still sparkled under artificial suns. Its sky remained bright, painted with floating gardens and rainbow domes, but the streets were empty, because fear had replaced pride for centuries. This planet ruled the galaxy with whispers and golden lies. Now those whispers had turned into screams, and humanity had arrived, not with an army, but with proof. The Truth Seeker hovered just above the capital's outer rings. Its shadow stretched over miles of polished stone, but it didn't fire, it waited. Captain Elias stood on the main deck, hands behind his back. He didn't want conquest. He wanted one thing, judgment. Mira Vos sat beside him, watching the live feed from below. Hundreds of alien civilians had gathered in front of the Council's tower, not to protest, but to witness, because something bigger than war was happening. Now down on the surface, Councillor Vale stepped onto the central platform. No guards, no weapons, only a memory stick in his hand. He raised it high and spoke. "This contains the voices of the silenced, the footage of the betrayed, and the records of those we tried to erase." The crowd was silent, then screens lit. Up across the city, images played of the destroyed human ships, the medical experiments, the slave colonies, the forced famines, and the Council's own orders, signed and sealed. The galaxy gasped, and the Council fell silent, each of them now exposed. No more hiding behind words like stability and security. Now they stood naked before the truth. On every alien world, protests turned into revolutions. Old enemies became allies. New alliances were born. The message was clear. The age of silence had ended on Earth. Bells rang across continents, not to celebrate war, but to honor the fallen, those who died waiting for the truth to come. Now their voices were free, inside the Truth Seeker. Aina Kim received a direct transmission. It was from the last remaining counselor, Prime Elanaris. Her face was pale, no longer proud. She spoke just 2 words: "I surrender." But Aina didn't smile. She simply turned to Elias and said, "She doesn't get to choose anymore." The tribunal was formed, not by Earth, not by the Council, but by representatives from 42 worlds, each of them once oppressed, each of them ready to speak. Elias, Vale, Aina, Mira. They all stood as witnesses, and one by one, the Council's crimes were read aloud for the galaxy to hear. But then something unexpected happened. A small child from the alien world Thallon asked for the floor. She walked up to the mic, her hands shaking. "My mother died in the Council camp," she said. "But I don't want them killed. I want them to feel what we felt, helpless." Her voice cracked. "I want them to serve." The tribunal didn't sentence death. Instead, it passed a new order. The former Council members would spend the rest of their lives rebuilding the worlds they broke. Brick by brick, planet by planet, word by word. Justice, not vengeance. That was humanity's choice. Back on the Truth Seeker, Mira watched as the flags changed. The Council crest lowered. A new symbol rose. A circle of hands, both human and alien, bound by light, not chains. Elias turned to his crew. "We didn't just change the galaxy," he said. "We reminded it what it means to be free," and the galaxy remembered, years later. Children of many worlds would grow up hearing stories of the Truth Seeker, of Elias Reed, Mira Voss, Aina Kim, and Counselor Vale. But the real hero was the idea that truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced again. Even if it came from Earth, even if it came with fire, it still came with hope. Because on that day, the galaxy learned something it would never forget, that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their rage, it was their refusal to kneel.